Hey everyone, I want to apologize again for this morning and the necessity to cancel our first in-person meeting, and hopefully everything will be okay for Wednesday, and it should be. So let me just talk about some of the sorts of things I wanted to say this morning with John Wesley's sermon, Catholic Spirit. I have the text down here, so I'll be kind of looking down, try to look up at you occasionally. But I'm going to start right at the beginning. So if you have it there, we can just walk through a few things. It is allowed even by those who do not pay this great debt that love is due to all mankind, the royal law. So even those who do not, and the reason he uses the language of debt is that in Romans 13, Paul actually writes, "Owe no one any debt, owe no one anything except to love one another," thereby implying some interesting notion of mutual indebtedness that we are created for in our lives with one another, especially within the church, the body of Christ. But I think there's a sort of a more broader, general, what we might call theological anthropology here, that is a theological understanding of what it means to be human, that God has created us, we ought to live with a sense of indebtedness. That is that we owe love toward every person that we encounter. And so Wesley begins that way. Even those who don't actually try to pay this debt, they agree with it. It carries its own evidence to all who hear it. So that first paragraph is sort of like about love in general toward all people, even your enemies, right? Then in the second paragraph he says, but it is sure there is a peculiar love which we owe to those who love God. Then he quotes, I think, a little bit from one of the Psalms, but mostly then it comes from, and you'll notice, the Gospel of John and 1 John. So I think we've used the term Johannine already. And so I want to talk about these first two paragraphs pretty quickly. In the first paragraph, the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself, which is quoted in all three of the synoptic gospels, very often in tandem with what Jesus identifies as the first or greatest commandment, which of course is to love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Some of you will know that first commandment to love God is called the Shema in the Jewish tradition, Shema being the Hebrew word for hear or listen, and is the first word in a passage that begins in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Hear or listen, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. In other words, as God is one, so also ought your collective love as the people of Israel be one or be unified, be your entire life together loving God. That's, again, quoted in the Synoptic Gospels, often with, it is quoted in the Synoptic Gospels, never by itself, I don't think, always in tandem with the second command to love your neighbor as yourself, which is found in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. That command to love your neighbor as yourself then becomes the basic concern of Wesley's opening paragraph. And some of you might recall that love your neighbor as yourself is also quoted twice by Paul. In fact, one of them is when he says, owe no one anything but to love one another, for the one who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law. And he eventually quotes Romans 19:18 there. That's in he quotes Leviticus 19:18, and that's in Romans 13. Sorry. It's also quoted in the book of James, so it gets quoted quite a bit. Now, here's the point. When Wesley shifts to his second paragraph to talk about the peculiar love which we owe to those who love God, the first paragraph being about the love that we owe to all people, he shifts primarily to the Gospel of John and 1 John. And in the Johannine tradition, love for the neighbor is never alluded to or mentioned. Love your neighbor as yourself is not found in the Gospel of John, nor in any of the writings we call the Johannine tradition. Every time love is talked about in reference to other people in the Gospel of John, it is always and only in regards to fellow Christians. It is very sort of more of a tight-knit communal notion of love, loving one another. Jesus commands his disciples, love one another as I have loved you. He does not say go out and love your enemies or even love your neighbor, but rather the love is always quite tightly circumscribed to the community. And that's basically what that second paragraph is about. So I wanted to alert you to the fact that in the very opening of this sermon, you basically have what we might call a synoptic tradition and a Johannine tradition regarding love. And so I've probably said that enough now. That's the opening two paragraphs. Notice that in the third one, and I'm not going to go this tightly over the whole sermon, but look at paragraph 3. My dog is whining about something, and I don't know what. Ugh, it drives me crazy. All men approve of this, but do all men practice it? Do all people practice this? Daily experience shows the contrary. I just wanted to highlight that here, Wesley, here's an appeal to experience, not so much religious experience per se, but just like daily experience in the world, shows that, in fact, all people do not practice such love of either paragraph 1 or paragraph 2. And then from there, I'm just going to highlight a couple things that I really like. I like in paragraph 4, he says, we can have differences in opinions about modes of worship and so on, but does that have to prevent our union and affection with one another? Like maybe we're going to have Catholics and Episcopalians and Presbyterians and Nazarenes and Pentecostals who have their different modes of worship, but can we not have union and affection? Then I always love this next question. Though we cannot think alike, may we not love alike? Which is a challenge, right? To love others who do not think like me, particularly as the degree of unlikeness in our thinking expands or grows, it becomes more challenging. So Wesley is nonetheless challenging us to do so. I think there was just another thing or two I really like. This would be paragraph 3 and section 2. It is certain, this is the second sentence in paragraph 3 of section 2, it is certain so long as we know but in part, of course he's here thinking of what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13, that we know in part in our present experience in the world. So long as we know but in part that all people will not see things alike. It is an unavoidable consequence of the present weakness and shortness of human understanding that several people will be of several minds in religion as well as in common life. That's just the way it is. And I love that again, this is sort of an appeal to experience of the world as we know it. Paragraph 4, oh my. Nay, beyond this, although every person necessarily believes that every particular opinion which he holds is true, otherwise it wouldn't be your opinion. Yet no one can be assured that all of his opinions taken together are true. No, indeed. Every thinking person is assured that all my opinions are not true, seeing how to be human is to necessarily to err. This, therefore, we should be sensible of. We know in general that we make mistakes, although in what particulars we might be mistaken in our present opinions, we're not sure. I'm probably wrong about some things, I just don't know which things they are. And perhaps we cannot know. And I love that Wesley, we call this kind of a humble theory of knowledge. The philosophical word for that is epistemology. And at least on paper here, Wesley is being quite humble regarding epistemology, that is, his own knowledge and the knowledge of others. And so I like this. Let's see if there was any other thing I wanted to just sort of highlight. I know that you presumably have read this by now, and you'll give me your comment or two in response to this. I will, how are we doing? I might have to make a part 2. In fact, that's a good thing for me to do right now. I'm going to pause here.